Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
So glad you're here. Ryan, we're jumping back into it.
The Chosen.
The
This
Chosen.
is, in my opinion, I'm going to say this out the gate, and I probably shouldn't. This is probably our most iffy kind of episode.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't watched The Chosen, then you're like, well, okay, whatever.
I mean, we did last summer.
Yeah.
We went on a ride, and we did the first 2 seasons.
Yeah. And that was great, and I really loved it. This is the only kind of podcast we do that requires some homework.
Well, and we should
maybe
say
not required,
It's
but
spoilers.
Yeah.
Spoilers are going to be because we're basically talking through, basically just reacting almost to the episodes, and just 2 Bible nerds loving talking about Bible stuff. And The Chosen is actually, I think, one of those rare shows that both can hit the person that knows hardly anything about the Bible and they can really enjoy it, but it also like puts enough nuggets in there that the person that's been to Bible college or like has studied the Bible for a while, like, love it.
Here's what I'll say.
Love
if you haven't watched The Chosen, any of it, or if you've seen the first 2 seasons, whatever, you can listen to this episode. We're going to spoil the tarnation out of it.
Yes, we are.
But if you're just here for like some Bible background, archaeology evidence, whatever kind of, maybe not actually archaeology, but just like cultural background stuff, you'll still get stuff out of it because we're talking about the characters in a way that's true to their character in the Bible, even if it's not an event that happened in the Bible.
And
but
I think there's 2 ways. There's 2 ways to watch this. Right? One, you can watch this and then go watch the episode, and you'll get to see all the things that we're pointing out. But
it'll all be spoiled.
Or 2, watch the episode of The Chosen, season 3, season 3, episode 1, and then come back and watch this.
So, if you want to, we won't be hurt at all.
Nope.
Stop this episode.
Pause
Go
it.
to watch.angelstudios. Whatever else was there.
Just type in Chosen, watch on Google, and then it'll lead you.
And you can watch it for free. So, anyway,
100% free.
There's no money that goes into this on your end that you have to give, but there is some homework if you want to not have this spoiled. Anyway, let's get into it.
Just quick rebuttal.
I disagree.
Quick refresher. I was going to say quick recharge or recap because I think there's a part of this that it picks up right in the Sermon of the Mount.
There's some cliffhangers that happened in season 2 right at the end. The 2 cliffhangers are that they introduce Judas at the end of season 2 and that he's about to start Sermon on the Mount and then the season ends. And you're like, why?
Oh my gosh.
You do that
and then it was far too long, but we didn't want to start filming these until they've gotten, I think there's 6 or 7 episodes.
I think they've finished it. So they're all out or the last one's about to be released.
So we waited until all of them so that way we can kind of honestly just rush our way through it. Not because we want to rush, but because we like watching them back to back to back because it kind of gives it more congruency.
We're children of the later 2010s who just want to watch the whole show all at once.
I love
the whole season.
We were at a Mexican restaurant here in town, and my kids were trying to watch a football game, and they kept being all these commercials, and they were just like, "Dad, they have so many of those breaks. Why don't they get the premium so they don't have the commercials?" And I remember I was like, "Son, they don't have that on regular TV, and they haven't had that, and they never will." I was like trying to explain this. It's so funny you say that. All right, so I mean, let's just jump into it. Favorite part of this whole episode is just this new edition of Judas. It is so intriguing to me.
It's because what's interesting is what we get when we read the Bible and hear about Judas. None of these people are writing the Gospels as they're happening. They're all writing them retrospectively. They're writing them looking back and trying to record what happened during Jesus' ministry and all that. And all of them hate Judas.
Yeah, they have a very bias. They have bias.
Yeah.
Judas the betrayer or Judas,
even when they introduce them, they're like, these 11 guys and Judas, who we all know is the worst. It's like that's the attitude, especially in the Gospel of John. John is angry. He's fuming when he has to write about Judas. He usually just says the disciples and leaves him out. But when he mentions him, he's like, that little scumbag, that little dirty rat. That's like how he talks about Judas. So you never experience Judas in the Gospels as a guy who is convinced of the ministry of Jesus.
Yep.
You only experience him through the eyes of the other disciples after he's betrayed Jesus, which is like...
It's totally normal. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah,
but at the same time, like I think this gives you such a fuller understanding of Judas at one point really did believe that Jesus
and
was.
Maybe even through all of it, which we'll talk about in a second. But the picture you get in the Gospels when you read them is that Judas shows up with his little devil horns poking out.
Yes.
And Jesus is like, sure, you can follow me. Or like, sure, you can follow me because you're going to kill me and that'll be good for my stuff. Like those are the two impressions you can get from reading the Gospels. But you have to realize that most of them probably didn't know. They probably weren't like, this guy's going to betray you from day one.
No.
Even though that's how they write about him.
That's
years
what's
later.
even so funny is because Mary and Andrew have this moment at the very end where Andrew has to apologize. And I was thinking about that with how that's like contrasted with Judas and how Judas is successful. He's got big entrepreneur plans. Like he's got talent with money and like selling. And he's thinking, I'm going to bring all this to the table and be a benefit to Jesus.
Yeah.
Whereas Andrew is worried because of Mary's reputation and like she has a teeny little house. They don't even have enough food.
Yeah.
And like she's going to hold Jesus's ministry.
Yeah, that's what he had to apologize for later in season 2. Mary kind of has this thing and she leaves and kind of goes back to her old way of living. And then Jesus comes and finds her kind of at the bottom of the barrel and extends grace. And she comes back and tries to apologize and he welcomes her in. But when she's coming back and trying to apologize and like just full Luke 15 prodigal son, like let me just be a servant, groveling, all that kind of stuff. Andrew tries to stop her and is like, he's too good for you, basically. Like, get out of here, you traitor and whatever. And so he's apologizing for this stuff. And then they introduce Judas. And you're just like, the whole time, there are about 100 moments where Judas says something that you're like, that's not true. That's not going to be the way it is. And they know who Judas is when they're writing the show. They're like, there's all these little things like he visits his sister at the end and she's like, it's never not about money with you. Man, doesn't that just pierce you in the heart?
When I heard that line, I was
sell him for 30 pieces of silver. But something else that stuck out to me around there is him saying, I'll use my financial services for Jesus, money management, whatever, help make his ministry and spread this gospel. I feel like when Simon the Zealot said that, Jesus was quick to be like, no.
Yeah.
You will not stab people for me.
Yep.
You will not use your assassin skills for me. But it seems like Jesus hasn't, at least in episode 1, clearly said, no, you won't need to use your financial stuff for me. Because I think he was, if I'm right,
he was
not the accountant, the treasurer.
Yeah, the treasurer
for the.
Which he ends up, I think that'll probably be the role he's introduced. I just think it's funny that first conversation that Jesus has right after the Sermon on the Mount, and basically Judas comes up to Jesus and they officially meet. Like the conversation is so like, I was just almost like hanging on every word.
It's cordial. But like you're trying to figure out if Jesus knows.
Yes. Like you're trying to read him like, oh, he's still going to welcome this wolf into his flock, and the way he talks. And I found Jesus, and let's just transition. Judas is one of the main things, but I still cannot get over the beautiful, just the way they have formulated the character of Jesus in this series is incredible.
He's caring out the wazoo. He's like, so this is my favorite part. And you saw this at the end of, I almost said chapter 2, the end of season 2 when he's preparing the Sermon on the Mount. That's like one of my favorite parts of episode 8, the last one of that season, is that he's speaking some of the Sermon on the Mount in practice with Matthew there. And it keeps cutting to different people as he's preaching. So he talks about don't be angry or whatever. I'm just kind of guessing and trying to go on memory. But like, don't be angry. And it goes to Simon, who's been like pushy and defensive and whatever. And don't be anxious. And it goes to Andrew. And for those who have lost somebody, and it goes to somebody who's lost somebody. I don't know. It keeps cutting to all these people and showing that like the Beatitudes, the blessed are the meek and the lowly and the whatever, that all those are like his giant bleeding heart for all these people. And it does that again in this episode.
It does that.
But in person, it's not cutting away to like memories or different scenes. It's just Jesus saying like, don't be anxious. And then kind of looking at Andrew. And even later in the episode, when Andrew visits John the Baptizer and he's like, didn't he say something just for you? And he's like, don't be anxious.
Yep.
That one.
You
can't even add an hour to your life. And he was like, sounds like Jesus. So that's how I love that they're painting Jesus is this guy who cares so deeply. He's so full of wisdom, but he uses his wisdom to try to bless and help and help people thrive.
And Jesus does such a good job because I don't know if you felt this tension, but I felt this. So the first 2 seasons, I feel like they're so in awe of who Jesus is that a lot of times they're just waiting for him to tell them what to do. But I can tell their confidence is growing, and so they're starting to assume or try to help in like really more proactive ways. Yeah. And Jesus is having to guide the conversations or correct. Or like say no. Rather
than totally originate plans.
Yes. And the way he navigates that and the language and the tone and like how they do it, it feels so much like real life. Like it's not just Jesus going around and them just like, oh.
Yeah.
Like,
it's almost, I want to say he's soft but fair. It's almost like a Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
He's tough, but he's fair. Like he's not mean about any of this or authoritarian or whatever, but he's like resolute.
Well, like he's Matthew comes after the sermon, right? And he's like wanting to ask some clarification about some things that he changed. And like he has this really anxious, like really intense, and Matthew totally misses that there's somebody else wanting to talk to Jesus.
Yeah.
And he's trying to gently show Matthew, Jesus is like, hey bud, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. And then like you can tell he's like, oh, okay. And then right before he leaves, he goes, hey Matthew, thank you for your help. And like you could just tell Matthew's like, oh, we're good. Like
Jesus is guiding all this stuff, but also like, totally the economy Jesus is playing in. How he's measuring his words and the value of that. His economy is in hearts.
Yep.
It's not in power and it's not in whatever. So you watch him dismiss Matthew. Not in a mean way, but just like, that's not what we're doing right now. But also show him value so that he's not just drawing out value from him and like eating it up and throwing it away.
The way every character feels gently loved, either enough to correct, enough to give patience and timing to. Because then later a woman shows up who's, of course, from Herod's court, and like we don't really know. There's
rich.
Yeah, and everyone's reacting kind of in this naturally kind of
suspicious
way. So, off-putting or suspicious or even confrontational a little bit.
Yeah.
And like Jesus almost has to handle his disciples at the same time, make this woman feel valued. And he does.
Up and is in a very subdued kind of way, literally says, hey, and her name, as if either he knew her before or he used his super special Jesus powers to like already know who she is and where she's from. And I don't know which, and it wasn't really clear, but
you could tell she felt instantly comfortable with him when she didn't feel comfortable with
she was
anyone
sent by
else.
John the Baptist to go find him. There's a few times in the Gospels that a disciple of John is sent to Jesus. Yeah. So it's not uncommon that it would be a person like this. It is uncommon that it would be a Roman or Greco-Roman background person.
And a woman.
I love the casting in this show because without... I'm not being racist, but they cast nationalities and stuff very specifically because Jesus is ministering to Jews, and Jews are in this time, and honestly right now, usually, they're a religion and a nationality.
Yep.
So the fact that you can kind of just eyeball their race by their casting is super correct. Like the people who stick out because they're not Jewish origin. So the people who stick out are the Romans, who are all like pasty white Europeans, which is kind of correct. And this lady sticks out immediately like that. Yeah, color of her clothing, and which shows off some of her wealth and all that. But like the fact that she's white helps her, like you immediately identify, which is not untrue of the original context.
No, and it actually helps to understand why there's conflict in the moment. Like you recognize, okay, and it's less about racial. I think it's more economic. I think it's more government. Like it's more power.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like obviously the racial part's a piece of it. Yeah. But you can tell like they comment on like she had silver earrings and like she gave this fancy
It's all
gift.
of it together, but you just have to realize that like international travel did not exist.
Yep.
Like in the I'm going to spend $300 and over a couple hours go to this other country.
Yep.
Impossible. Like you had to be super rich. So most people stayed close to where they were born, and nationalities and race kind of spread slowly.
Yep.
And so, if you were under Roman occupation and people had traveled a long way just to be in charge of you, there wouldn't be a lot of those kind of people.
No.
That's all I'm trying to say. It's like the melting pot that America is. You think of like a Chicago or a New York and all these different races of people and all these different whatever.
Yeah.
Not there.
No.
There's some mixing, but like most people didn't have the resources or like the infrastructure to even travel for a vacation like that.
No,
maybe
you feel
they'd
that
walk
tension.
for 2 weeks to go visit family, but like that's about it.
Well, and the Roman world ends up bringing a little bit more of that to it because of the Roman world, Roman roads and trade culture.
Yeah,
but it's still
all
rare.
New.
It's all new and it's all rare.
All I'm trying to say is it is a Jewish culture almost exclusively with little travel inside, and then Romans shotgun pelleted into the middle, and you can pick them out. We've said this before too. I love that all the Romans are white with American accents, and that all the Jews have. Honestly, you can't really tell like what accent. You assume it's Middle Eastern, but like it's they're speaking English, so it's not an ancient Middle Eastern. Like they're doing something to help the ancient Israelites seem unfamiliar.
It's like
and help the Romans
too.
seem very familiar.
Yep.
Usually they cast like British people in that role, and they just cast full-blooded Americans.
Yeah.
And anyway, I just love that casting and what that does to you as the American viewer as you're watching.
Absolutely. And
That's all I'm trying to
here's
say.
the cool thing about this episode. I felt like this was the first episode that started to branch out on what they were willing to invite into the narrative.
Yeah.
So they start with this like Judas idea and then money, and then they're going over to this guy that's a Pharisee that watched the sermon that's writing this paper that we don't really, I'm like, I don't even know what that is yet. But then we are introduced to this character of Judas. But then you also have like this brothers that are coming home to see their dad that seems confused. You have your first dating romance with Thomas.
You almost have your first sex scene.
You do. You have the first, you have Peter and his wife. They come home and
then,
I'm like, I literally looked at Ryan.
Nathaniel or whoever comes in, he's like, I didn't have a place to stay.
I literally looked at Ryan. They haven't been alone in a long time. Is the chosen going to go there? And then it went there, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. But the two, it was just all that stuff was kind of fun. They talked about.
But it's also really real. It helps the disciples not seem so scripted, because in the Gospels and that kind of storytelling, the same as a lot of the Old Testament and narratives like that, they only give you the details you need to know. So there's a lot missing. And so like character development in Peter, you can see it, but you have to infer some of it between the little bits that you're given. I love that the show's doing more like, hey, look, they're just walking.
Well,
they're trying to find a place
Peter's
to stay.
personality is like full on display there too. Like he's not only frustrated and disappointed and angry, and sometimes in the way that Jesus goes after things or the ministry, he's also frustrated and irritated when his friends aren't picking up on the signals that he wants to be alone with his wife. Like he's like the same responses. Where
Please
like,
leave.
He's like, I want you to go on the roof. On the roof? Yes, the roof. Get out of here. You know,
go eat that apple for about 2 hours on the roof.
And I thought it was just a brilliant way of making them human.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this show continues to do for me. It brings humanity to the characters.
Yeah.
It brings flesh and blood. It brings color to the Gospels and the character of Matthew. And I mean, the crescendo of the whole first episode is just this concept of being called son again and having a father. And the tragedy that kind of his job choice at the beginning of the entire show, when he was a tax collector, his father basically told him he was dead and he had no son again. Yeah,
I love the scene at the very beginning of episode 1 of season 3, which is kind of, it's exactly what you're talking about. It is the moment that Matthew's tax collecting comes to his father's house, and his father's like tells his wife, Matthew's mother, that to like go into mourning because I have no son. Like
and shuts the door.
Like theatrical and final and resolute that you don't exist to me anymore, and shuts the door. But then the episode ends with the reversal with
Matthew saying his dad's name.
Yeah.
Not Abba, saying his dad's name.
Alphaeus. As if he's another citizen in the kingdom that he's barely familiar with. And his relation with Jesus the rabbi has finally brought enough honor to his father and enough pride to his father that he finally is like, hello, son. And then episode ends
I was like, done. What's so fun is I feel like the show is very well written.
Yeah.
I feel like they're doing, we compliment the show all the time. I think it's something that if you watched, you will learn. Like, there's just no way you won't learn.
Yeah.
And if anything, you will have questions. Because Jairus, is it like one of the characters?
Jarvis is the Paul Bettany, the Iron Man talking to
AI
him.
taking over the world. Not Jairus. Jairus. He's a character where I'm like, is this the father of a daughter that's healed later in the Gospels? Or is this just a different Jairus? I don't know. Like
I would assume it's that guy.
It is, but
he seems very antagonistic to Jesus. And then after the end of the episode, they keep haggling over this scroll thing, whatever. And then what's this bucket?
I don't remember.
Yanni,
Pharisee,
whatever.
Yanni. I can't remember.
Whatever his name is. Anyway, Rabbi Yusuf, or whatever.
I think it's Yusuf.
Maybe it's Yusuf. Rabbi Yusuf, like, finally is like, hey, take this scroll to the secret place where nobody will find it. And he's like, it's not sealed. And he's like, I know. Shalom. See you later.
Shalom. Good luck.
He's like, I hope this is the turning point where somebody militantly antagonistic to the Jesus movement is going to accidentally read the sermon. Well, I mean, kind of on purpose, read the Sermon on the Mount that Yusuf recorded and then be like, oh, frick. And then when his daughter's sick is going to come to him.
He's going to be like,
that's
a
prediction. What? You'll hear about it in the next episode of The Chosen.
Well, and here's the thing. We don't want to make these too long. I think these episode, kind of reactions are honestly to whet your appetite to go and check out the show or to come back and maybe learn some things that you missed from the episode.
Yeah.
Because there is so much in this one that was, I think, great setups for a lot of things.
100%. There's not enough to talk about on its own in like a historical, cultural background stuff. Now, there is one thing I want to hit before we're done, which is this line Judas said when he's talking to his sister at the end. He says, his sister's worried about him. Don't you know that Rome doesn't like these rogue preachers and whatever who are going to talk bad about him and whatever. And he says, they don't usually kill their disciples all the time. And he's like, but I think this guy's the Messiah. Okay, that's cool. That's part of what we were talking about earlier. Judas actually believing in Jesus, which we don't see in the Gospels. We just see everybody being mad at him retrospectively. But then he says, I think he's the Messiah, and he's not going to, because of that, he's not going to die because he's going to lead us in revolt against the Romans.
And he's going to overthrow the Romans.
Yeah.
And I heard that line, both of those. The one where it's like, they don't always kill the disciples, always. And then two, I think he's actually going to win. I think he's going to lead.
Well, I'd say those two lines. He's going to win against the Romans, and he's not going to die.
Yep. Ooh.
Which he's a little wrong.
I was going to say.
But what's good about that in the show, and for the historical background kind of thing, is that is what people assume the Messiah is. That's why when Simon comes to him, he's like, I'm ready to use this blade to slay whoever you want.
Absolutely.
Whatever Romans, whatever traitors. And Jesus is like, no.
Yep.
I won't have you use that at all.
Well, and he's like, you don't even need to protect me. I don't need
He throws his blade in the lake, and then the guy finds it later, the Secret Service guy, whatever. Anyway, I say all that to say that their assumption, even though it's corrected, is that Jesus is here to lead a revolt against the Romans. He's going to be a victorious king covered in the blood of his enemies, and he's not going to die. And among how that interacts with the different disciples, there are people who have said, when you talk about Judas and studying Judas, that Judas sold out Jesus. Some people believe Judas sold out Jesus because he was filled with Satan and got greedy for money.
Yep.
And that is a absolute possibility. Other people have said Judas loves money, so of course money was part of it, but was upset with how slow Jesus' ministry was going. And he sold Jesus out to provoke Jesus to finally draw the sword and start killing Romans and like come out with this Messiah thing. Little did he know, he provoked what Jesus was actually trying to do, which is be killed by the Romans. And he didn't know that was going to happen. And if that's the way they're going with the show, you can see it in his words there. He won't die.
Yep. He hedged his bets to think that he was going to get the silver, add it to the ministry, and that Jesus was going to ultimately use this resting to be the catapult into taking on the Romans, and that he didn't know that Jesus was going to actually die. He didn't know it was going to be the end of the mission. That's why, obviously, when he commits suicide after Jesus dies, it's because he thinks his plan failed.
And he thinks he just killed the Messiah.
He just killed the Messiah.
Like maybe he was misled and he's been following a false Messiah, or maybe whatever. But that kind of retells his motives when he's coming with the religious leaders and the Romans to come find Jesus in Gethsemane. When he's like, the one I kiss on the cheek will be the guy you should arrest. He goes up and he says, Rabbi, and Jesus says, do what you've come to do. And he kisses him on the cheek. I think he's hoping that Jesus understands that that's the signal. It's time to go Super Saiyan and start killing Romans. And he doesn't.
Yep.
Peter strikes one and he's like, I'm going to undo that.
Yep.
I'm going to make sure he's just as good as he was before he came. Doesn't even rough anybody up. Unroughs people up. And then goes with him. And he's like, where's the militant Jesus I was hoping and expecting in?
Oh, it's
hoping for and expecting.
I am so excited because of the way that they're taking the show. I think it's only going to grow in its intensity. And I love that they're taking their time and building these characters. Of course, part of me wants them to rush to the end, just like every time I read a gospel. I'm like, let's just get to the good part, you know? But at the same time, I think the character development and what's going on is going to bring so much life to the rest of the story. I'm just stoked. Hey, if you want to continue to watch along with us, you can hit the subscribe button or leave a review. Feel free to pass this on to anybody. If you're watching this as a family or if you're watching this as an individual, encourage people to check out The Chosen. Start in season 1. It's so good.
We'll put the link to watch it in the description, and then you can find it.
And if you want to continue on this road, we're going to continue to watch these. We may not put them out every week, but we'll continue to watch them probably over the coming months. And I'm excited to continue to react and to see the direction the show goes. It's a uplifting and amazing thing to see. So, have any last thoughts, Ryan?
Nope. That was my last thought.
Have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you guys later.
See ya.